Welcome to yet another episode of The Cloud is Calling, and I am absolutely very excited to be joined today by my guest, Kassia Clifford, who is the channel partner manager at Software Secured, as well as a security consultant in the SOC 2 space. Kassia, it is absolutely phenomenal to meet you virtually, as our paths, as we've stated earlier, have crossed many times over social media. However, never quote unquote in person as of yet. But I really appreciate you taking your time today to come on the show. How are you?
Oh, thanks, Derek. Happy to be here. I'm doing awesome. Had a great
Awesome.
weekend. Beautiful weather here on Vancouver Island, and always excited to meet people 1 degree closer after being connected for years, socially and online.
Yes, we're inching ever so closer to potentially a maybe a conference meetup at some point.
There you go.
Um, you, like myself, share a very big passion for security, and it tends to be a focal point for organizations across all the spectrums, but more so startups seem to not always have the same resources, the same benefits as large enterprises. So, my first question to you is, why do you think startup organizations struggle a bit more to operationalize security versus their brethren in the enterprise space?
Good question. I think there are a few key factors that I've seen for startups that I've worked with, both inside as an employee. I've been in startup land for 6 years, and then also selling and marketing and consulting with these firms. One, usually there's a belief it will never happen to me. So bad things happen over here to the big players in the space who process sensitive data, and we're too small of a target. So that's,
Security by obscurity. Yes.
yeah, you got it. So I think that's one element. I believe also just a simple lack of awareness slash interest. So a lot of technical leaders in startups that I've worked with, they come from developer backgrounds and move into VP engineering, CTO, CEO roles. So they're here to solve problems, break stuff that no longer works, make stuff better, and they're usually quite intelligent, driven. And if they don't see security as relevant for them to push their goals forwards, it really just isn't interesting. Uh,
Yeah, I do find developers tend to struggle, right? They love building things, they love solving those problems, but for whatever reason, security never seems to be one of those problems that they like to solve. And I've had conversations with other guests. Obviously, this whole push of shift left and security, moving more to the developer realm. Has that permeated at all within startups, this kind of shift left mentality with those developers and those people that you've talked about, that you've seen?
So I think it's interesting. I've seen actually a pretty big shift in the last 3 years. I think there's been a proliferation of awareness
Hmm.
since the pandemic, with everyone working remotely and attacks increasing. So I do think that there is a change. I think also the market that most startups are serving, they're becoming more. Mm, let's say assertive with their security requirements
Hmm.
for anybody who's doing business there. So I do think it's becoming sexier, for lack of a better term. um,
That is a pretty good. I mean, yeah, that's true. I mean,
right?
hard to put it any other way.
Yeah. So I think because of that, we're seeing more advertisements for
Hmm.
for people, not just businesses, on what you need to do to stay secure. Um, I also think that one of the other challenges, I guess, that I've seen development teams work through is that usually in startups, they're under extreme pressure. So huge
Yeah.
commitments. Their roadmap easily deviates depending on the next big logo that comes in that demands something, or a renewal on the table that's going to give X amount of roadmap, or
Hmm.
VC funding that comes in and those investors have these requirements. So when everything feels like a priority, nothing is a priority. And security, because we don't know it, didn't sign up for it, don't like it, don't understand it, feel silly, feel dumb, or embarrassed, usually goes on the back burner. And I think this is why assessing risk is actually one of the biggest challenges and pathways to
Mhm.
helping bring more security left.
No, you touched on a great point. I think, especially in the startup world, to your, everything is important. I got to focus on everything. And then I've seen this happen a few times, even in large organizations where, because everything's important, nothing's important. And so things
Mm-hmm.
start kind of slipping through that crack. It- As you've gone and helped some of these startup organizations build their security programs, what are some of those key strategies that you feel they need help to get going so that, things don't slip through the cracks and that they have a good sound base to carry forward as VCs and other investments come in and they've got to kind of shift on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I think for myself, I see myself as a change manager. I've been in
Mhm.
leadership positions most of my career, and I come from an entrepreneurial background, a family run business. So I'm used to doing more with less, fixing problems that are there, and scaling for growth,
Mhm.
often working myself out of jobs and creating process that's scalable. That's just a natural inclination of mine,
Yeah.
reflected in my LinkedIn profile. And so one of the things that I like thinking about whenever I think of security is that it's a change management process. What that means is if we can see it through that lens, um, executive buy-in is key. We have to start from the top. My uncle gave me this phrase years ago when I was working through a change management experience, and it's the fish rots from the head. So
I've never
it,
heard that one. That's definitely a new one for me. The fish rots from the head. Okay.
it's
Very
graphic.
interesting.
So
A little, no, yeah, a little graphic, but I get where it's come from, right? Yeah, the kind of the decay starts from the head and works its way down to the body. I get where he's coming from that one.
so we need so with that, I keep that in mind whenever I'm working on bringing in change to an organization.
Hmm.
Most startups, when they're investing in security, it's going to involve their HR, their people process, their IT, their legal, their sales efforts, and their engineering team, in addition to overall governance. So that is a huge lift. And the company leaders who sign off on it need to understand what's in it for them because they're extremely busy under pressure. They have their own families or personal lives that they're managing around building a company. I also think that it's important to hear air grievances before implementing solutions. So provide a space where the leadership can state all of the reasons why they don't want to do those things and what their concerns are, so that that can just be an open conversation that's carried forward, and education can take place over time.
Yeah.
I do think making it fun and digestible is super key, especially for startups. Now, I like living my life that way, right? We're on this earth
Yeah.
for a short time,
Hmm.
so I'm here for a good time too. And
Gamification, right?
you got it. If
Yeah.
your program's dull, nonsensical,
Hmm.
irrelevant, it's a top-down draconian culture of security you're going to build, and you'll gain compliance, but not an understanding, buy-in, or actual champions for change.
Hmm.
So some things that we did in one of the programs I built, I was I knew a great risk was our team clicking on links and doing stuff, downloading
Oh,
all the
don't
apps.
click those links. It can be very dangerous. Very dangerous.
Yes,
Right?
and I
Think
also
before you
know
click. That's the
you
phrase.
got it. You got it. And people move quickly, especially in startups. You're
Oh,
you're
yeah, yeah.
moving quickly. And some people's jobs, like marketers, their job is to have people click on links.
Hmm.
So there's a natural inclination to do the activity that they're asking others to do. So we had put in place a Slack channel, our security Slack channel, and anytime we just had it as a standard process that if anyone received a weird email or social media outreach or text, we'd take a screenshot, upload it, and then we'd roast the hacker. And so we ended up getting like an evil emoji for our CEO with a mustache, and and
Nice.
we just made it fun. So
Yeah.
that strategy certainly helped me win some hearts and minds. And then lastly, I'll say tying it back to revenue.
Hmm.
For security, it's And for startups, anybody, enterprises too are facing this recession right now, right? So everybody
Yep.
is cutting budgets. New line items that don't make sense and aren't tied to business growth are really tough to keep on budget sheets. So one thing that I did was I was lucky. I worked very closely with legal teams to review MSAs that came often
Mhm.
on client papers, which is very
Yep.
common for startups before they hit a certain growth stage. And in that, I just began tracking security requests and requirements tied to the specific dollar amount. And that way it made it a heck of a lot easier to say, okay, well, X number of millions is associated with getting a SOC 2. These controls and these processes are related to that.
Yep.
Therefore, those processes and controls are actually worth X million of dollars. Let's move forward with this change.
Yeah, no. Getting those type of audits is are big revenue generators. I don't think people truly understand, and you and I were chatting before this about a SOC 2 audit that I'm aware of, but they're in order to do business with a lot of these companies, especially for startups, in order to win those net new clients, they have to have SOC 2 or something of a similar nature. And yeah, there's millions, if not tens of millions of revenue tied up in that audit. So oh, it can be huge to get that. I love the emoji thing, by the way. He'll be on this season, but I'm gonna. One of our other guests is Chris Nicholas, who is the senior VP of Cloud, and we also like to have fun with that. And we always joke, and hopefully, I'm not dating myself too bad. The movie Zoolander with Ben Stiller, he does the blue steel look. So we have an emoji of Chris Nicholas doing the blue steel. And so it's kind of one of our favorite
Awesome.
emojis to post if somebody does something unique or something worth championing. We do that. We give it the blue steel look. So I like that. I love the CEO with kind of the bad thing. I'll have to see if there's something that we can come up with. That's awesome.
Beautiful. That's great.
Um, so shifting kind of focus here just a tiny bit. You're in your current role, you deal a lot with software as a service. Um, what are some of the areas that organizations should focus on when it comes to software as a service security? Because you as a startup, even enterprises, right? We don't have control over 95% of what that software does because it's operated and owned and maintained somewhere else. So, what are some of the things that we can focus on as an organization when it comes to software as a service security?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess for SaaS in particular, and this is the group of clients that I get to work with every day, are high growth SaaS firms based in the States and Canada primarily,
Mhm.
doing big business with highly regulated environments. So government entities, security firms, healthcare, Fortune 500 banking institutions. Data security is their client's prime concern when they're looking at their procurement process through the security privacy lens, right? So at the last stage of their deals, it's the security questionnaires, it's looking at attestations, it's looking at pen test reports. I I believe that proper application security pen testing is one of the key investments for startups where they will always get a return in multiple ways. So it's usually one of the first ways to prove security maturity for their business growth. So that helps their sales leaders and C suites continue to do the business they need to do to help the company grow. It also, with a firm that does manual testing and some light threat modeling, it serves as a really great education tool for the developers in security to see going through that process, like what are our critical assets and how are we protecting them? And what are all of the integrations that we've built to perhaps support the convenience of our end users and build partnerships? And but what are all the risks that are associated with that? And can we then think securely in the design phase? Um, and I've seen that happen, that security maturity over time of doing that type of in-depth testing. A lot of companies begin with a network pen test. Network security has been around for much longer than application
Quite a
security,
while.
right? So it's a great way to start. However, the findings are generally less meaningful, like less critical. There's lower severity.
Mhm.
Um, I do think that there's a lot of importance in having proper infrastructure controls, so cloud security, having those controls in place, and logging and monitoring. This seems not exciting at all, but actually, I think logging and monitoring is really important.
It is. It's very important. And it's funny that you mentioned that. That's something I feel like we've kind of retermed logging and monitoring. At least I know in my world now we call it observability, right? The ability to
Mm,
observe and
mhm.
survey not only just infrastructure but applications and security aspects, and really kind of make sure we do anomaly detection, help kind of
Yes.
identify user experience. Where are they in the application? Are they stuck? Are they able to progress through and kind of get that full focus? So to your point, I think logging and monitoring has a not favorable connotation when it comes to hearing that. And so when you
Mhm.
say, okay, it's not logging and monitoring, you're observing, right? You as an IT operations
Yes.
person are observing how the environment's doing and being able to kind of pick out those different points of information and correlate them and be able to hopefully address any potential issues or performance problems or anything of that nature.
Yes. And at the least, or in the worst case scenario, you are able to track back where a breach or incident
Hmm.
occurred,
Yeah.
and you have a defensible system for your stakeholders, your IT security committee, your board, your client base, your team, on how that happened and what you can do to mitigate that risk moving forward.
Oh yeah, 100%. Um, Last question before we wrap it up here. Identity security. This is always one that I love talking about because for whatever reason, most organizations, I feel like it's still kind of the fringe concept. But when you talk about cloud, and in my world, right, identity is so important. It's literally talked about anywhere. When hear it from Microsoft, you hear it from Amazon, from Google, Oracle, and many others. Adopting released privileged access is a struggle, hands down. But probably more so in the startup world because you're new, you have to be flexible, you have to be nimble. So the tendency is just to give everyone admin access, we'll think about it and deal with it later. Um, and then as they grow, that problem grows with it. And so why do you feel it's such a struggle for startups versus say larger enterprises when it comes to that?
Yeah, access management is a killer. Access management and vendor management kick my
Yes.
hiney all the time. They are real challenge areas. I think some of it goes back to those key points as to why it's hard to operationalize security, in that it will never happen to me, so that seems silly. Lack of
Hmm.
awareness of what the true risks and benefits are from
Yeah.
least privilege. And then afterwards, lack of resources and talent, or budget to pay for resources and talent who know what to do. So I truly think access management, my experience with building it from the ground
Hmm.
up, it's super cumbersome to actually gain access. Okay, so one, backing up, it's
Hmm.
expensive to have IT security to have a license or seat in every software when you're managing a
Yeah.
budget.
Hmm.
So then that means, okay, we need to have super great communication with whoever the admin is of each software, if that's the case, and assign them additional security duties from what they're willing to take on or interested in taking on or understand why they should. And then, forcing this look at
Here's your
who
job
needs access.
description. We just notated a few other additional things, by the way,
Yeah, yeah. You're also on the IT security committee by default.
by default. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that part's hard. I think also in startups, people shift from all over, right? So
Oh
so
yeah.
I my title is channel partner manager. I'm also helping a bit with customer success, and I'm helping build out our strategic marketing plan, and I'm, doing sales ops, because we're a growing firm as well too, and that's what's needed in a lean firm. So it forces more structure, which causes big conversations about roles and responsibilities. And then
Those are never
afterwards,
fun conversations. Zero.
no, they're they're not fun. And it also it just seems like an administrative task with no gain.
Yeah.
So I think that explaining what the benefits to that to access proper access management, in addition to, okay, well, you'll be compliant and you'll keep your stakeholders happy, you know, being able to explain that can really help. And I think also what's challenging is a lot of startups, they're going through, if they're VC funded, they're going through mass hiring and then they're
Hmm.
sometimes mass layoffs. So it's
Yep.
a huge amount of effort to onboard and track properly. That said, totally possible. I've put it in place manually, doing that before there were budgets,
Oof, manually.
and
Ouch.
yeah. um, so it can be done.
Hmm.
Um, I think the last piece is a lot of companies. What I see too is that startups in particular, they'll invest in a VCSO or somebody, the CTO or DevSecOps person has security on the side of their desk, and so that means they also have IT.
Yeah.
And the company has to get to a certain growth stage to understand the difference between IT and security. So then there can be more investment in resources to help with access management.
Yeah. No, 100% agree with that. And I have seen those challenges more times than I care to count on that aspect. So, all right. Before I let you go, because I know you've been involved in the trenches of security like myself, so I have to ask, what is your best in the trenches story around security? Obviously, giving
Mm.
away zero proprietary details here, um, because we none of us want to get in trouble. But
Yeah.
what's your best story?
Of course. So the one that comes to mind that's most visceral
Hmm.
would be it was within my first 3 or 4 months of working as a security compliance manager. I had been consulting first with the firm and then, had done a public announcement on LinkedIn. I was, super excited for the opportunity, ready to be building and getting that. I grew up in agriculture, so I like getting my hands dirty. I'm a kinesthetic learner, right? So this was the best
Yep,
way for me
hands
to
on.
learn was to
Hmm.
do, you got it. And I just moved to the country. I moved out of Ottawa. I moved closer to family, near the water, and just moved that weekend. And I didn't have um, my internet set up or a home phone, which I needed because I was barely had cell reception where I was, and
Hmm.
I needed to get a landline.
Yes,
Anyways, so I
I'm
had over
shocked
the
people still
Maylong.
have those.
It's it's
Country, I
so
totally get.
surreal
Hmm.
holding a phone to your, like, it's the weirdest thing to hold a phone to talk to it's
Yep,
so odd.
yep,
We're lucky these days, right? We
yes.
get to do everything hands free.
Modern technology. All
So
right, sorry. Please continue.
yeah, so anyways, I had moved all my things. It was 30 degrees plus 30 degrees Celsius, warm weather. I was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally. And then, as one does on a Saturday evening, I check my work email really quickly and I see that my Okta, somebody had been attempting to access my Okta account. And this is when
Oh,
and so I don't have my internet set up properly. I'm just on my phone. It's going in and out of me being able to access it. I can't Google anything because I'm in the country. I have to wait until Monday to be able to get my
hmm,
router. I can't do it on a weekend. And I'm freaking out. And I truly felt I was so exhausted because I just thought, like, I sat on the floor in the room where my internet should be and my office will be, and I could feel this, like, just like Hodor, if you watch Game of Thrones, like I'm just
yep, hmm,
holding the door
yes.
to keep them at
Hold the
bay,
door.
and I'm crossing fingies that I'm not responsible for taking the company down, and all I know is I have MFA, I have secure complex passwords, and I know that we have logging and monitoring or
Hmm.
observability set up
Yep.
on Okta in particular because it was one of the data sources that I had added so that I would
Yep.
avoid these paranoid moments. But it was truly this realization of weight, of responsibility,
Hmm.
for managing risk for a company, and equal fear of what did I get myself into.
Congratulations, you're hired. Oh, by the way, you may have just caused a breach. Woo! Ouch.
First
Okay,
quarter
yeah, that's a
done. Yeah,
story.
yeah. They didn't get in, luckily.
No, yes, thankfully. Hopefully the story has a happy ending, and you successfully held the door, so to speak, from that regard. Wow. Equally fun trench story. I guess that I could say one. This one more hits home. Me being in security, right, and I've been very religious of, like you, very complex passwords, having MFA wherever possible. Um, However, a few years ago, I did not do a good enough job of making sure that I was vetting out certain breaches that had happened.
Mm,
And so, unfortunately, when a certain company did get breached, my information was part of one of the things that got stolen. And sure enough, because I didn't do my due diligence and assessed the risk and potentially things, a few weeks later, I got this mail. Yes, regular old mail. We're not talking email in the mailbox from AT&T. And I opened it up and it's like, "Oh, congratulations, you've opened up this new cell phone line." And I'm like, I did not." And so I had to get on the phone with AT&T and T and call them and be like, "I didn't do this." And, kind of run through that whole process. And as I was sitting there thinking, I was like, if this were me 5 years ago, like, this would be a completely different conversation. This customer service person would have no clue what identity theft is. Like, this would just,
yep,
like, I'd be getting nowhere. And so
yep,
it's amazing to see how far we've come. And thankfully, because, and yes, I'm not saying this to plug AT&T in any way, but I will honestly admit they did a very good job handling the identity theft and took care of the issue. But it led me to then deeply investigate that breach. And sure enough, I located the hacker in Texas outside of San
mm.
Antonio. And they decided to go on a shopping spree at several other department stores and whatnot. And I worked with the local authorities to apprehend said individual, which was a bit of
Oh,
personal justice. Uh,
cool.
so
Yeah,
that's
vendetta.
a
Yeah,
fun
well,
trench story that it's like, you know what?
nice.
I don't think that person quite realized who they had hacked, but it's like, it's all right, all right. You
Yes.
came after me. It's time to, go after you. So yeah, so that was a different, a different experience. And I understand there's a lot of people out there who don't have those resources, their skilling or capabilities
Yep.
to do that. But thankfully we've come at least far enough in a way in technology that, look, probably take it from both of us. MFA is a good thing. Very strong passphrases, not passwords,
Yeah,
phrases. Think of
yeah.
"hold the door" as a phrase, right? If we're keeping with our Game of Thrones reference there.
Yeah.
But awesome. This has been fun. Thank you so much for coming on, being a guest, and I will definitely have to set up another return visit. I think that would be another fun conversation that we can have around security. And maybe talk a little bit more about USA versus Canada and compare and contrast.
Cool,
um,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
security over borders, right? We can see how that works on both sides, and maybe how well we cooperate too. All right,
Uh,
Cassia, thank
Wonderful.
you so much for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it. You have a absolutely wonderful time, and I look forward to chatting with you again sometime in the future.
Thanks so much for having me, Derek.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And take care. And folks, remember, the cloud is calling.